Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome to Creation Watch, where we get our eyes on all the different ideas on creation and how the world came to be, and how those worldviews affect the way that people interact with us directly. Today, I am reviewing a friend of the Hive who I've have a sometimes like an offline relationship with too, I guess I should say, somebody that I interact with privately as well. So but they recently did a video about transgender folks, and I wanted to give my perspective on what they have to say here. I have not watched this, so um, you all will be witnessing this live with me and seeing my live reaction and live response um, to this. So, without further ado, we are going to be watching Bread of Life, Rebekah, and her "Is It a Sin to Be Trans?" Christian discussion video. So, yeah, this you're gonna see me react live. I don't know what's gonna be said here. I haven't watched it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bread of Life channel. We are going to be having a discussion here today about uh, is being trans a sin? And my position is that being trans is not a sin. There's nothing in the Bible that would lead us to believe that being trans is a sin. And there's some Christians who disagree with me on that. And so I just wanted to open this up and have a discussion. So whether you agree or disagree, you're welcome to join the stream. I'm here with my friend Amy, and she's going to kind of start us off by sharing some things from her perspective. And we look forward to hearing from you in the chat. And if you want to join the stream, you can. Just be respectful, and stream joiners must show their faces at least back.
Yeah, she did. She did say that. She did say no, it's not a sin. So we'll see. There's people in the community, our community, and my community, and the community that I share, are overlapping communities that I share with a multitude of other creators and producers. There's mixed feelings about Rebekah from Bread of Life. So let us enter this fray with an open mind. I don't have any personal issues at all with Rebekah. She's always been sweet as pie to me. I talk to her privately. We have discussions about stuff going on in our personal lives. I have a similar relationship with Rebekah that I do with Cindy Lincoln, who is Kent Hovind's ex-wife. I'm on good terms with both of them. But yeah, we'll see.
Backstage before I let you on. And so, Amy, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a stay-at-home mom in Texas. So this issue is being discussed a lot in my state. And I've been a Christian since I was young. I grew up in a Southern Baptist tradition. And yeah, so just in the last few years, I've been getting to know some loved ones that are trans, and also just various other people in the LGBTQ community. So I've been searching my faith for reconciling that stance, and I've come a long way, and God has shown me so many amazing scriptures, and just His Holy Spirit has really given me a peace about affirming that being trans is not a sin, and being LGBTQ is not a sin. So
Wow. Okay. So, can you
Okay.
explain that perspective? And today we're focusing on trans, being transgender specifically. And I will do other streams on, being gay and same sex marriage and that kind of thing. But specifically with trans, where does this affirmation come from? Like,
okay.
mhm.
Yeah, good question. There's several places. In the going back to the very beginning, Genesis 1, when God created mankind, the earth, the animals, everything. I heard another podcast on Freed Hearts years ago.
I do want to see more more pushback from within the Christian community like this. So I'm hoping that some people come in with some dissenting opinions. And I do know it does show that other people, like looking ahead, it shows other people pop in. But there's Nitty. I know Nitty pops in. And then there's another person here, another person there. So I am interested in seeing what these other folks have to say.
And it kind of stuck in the back of my head. And since I've read more and more about it, it's really stuck with me. But basically, from the standpoint that, in Genesis, it talks about how God created the heavens and the earth, and he created male and female, and he created, the sun and the moon and all these things. And they're opposite ends of the spectrum. And
well, I mean, it doesn't really, I don't know, I'm being pedantic, but it doesn't really create male and female. He just created male. Then later he used part of the male to create female, which kind of inverts the notion of of maternity. Really, it puts maternity into the male spectrum, which is super weird to me. But Christians need it because God is masculine.
He doesn't necessarily call out all the specific things that are in between, such as, he created, day and night. Well, there's high noon, there's midnight, there's dusk and dawn, and all the different settings of literally of the sun and the reflection. So, and then also the land and the sea. There's parts where the land meets the sea, and there's sort of like a gradient into the ocean or onto land. A lot of these in between states. And, whenever you get to male and female, it's a little bit.
Hey, if you didn't see it last night on Germania's stream, Pat Lowinger, he like trounced some bigotry. It was gorgeous. So good work there, Pat. Good work.
Bit more complex, and the discussion gets more complex. But seeing that God created man in his image, and God doesn't say that he's only he created woman in his image. So God encompasses the entire, state of gender and sexuality. God is all of that. And since we are created in his image, that was the first thing that made me go, okay, this makes sense. So whenever God creates a human being in his image, it is about that person's soul and about being created in his image, not necessarily, a specific gender. So that was the first thing that really led me on the affirming path for transgender people. And the second thing that I've recently really started digging into is the story about the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8.
So I don't know how I feel about comparing trans people to eunuchs. I'm not going to lie. I think that's a little squick, but let's hear what she has to say about it.
This story has come up like 3 or 4 different places in my life in the last couple months. And there's such beauty in it because it really illuminates where, Paul was talking to the Christians, the first, century church, about who is included. And there were like rules against eunuchs going into the assembly and going into, to worship God. They weren't allowed. And eunuchs aren't exactly a, apples to apples comparison to a modern day transgender person.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify, because despite the popular misconception and notion pushed, gender transition, bottom surgery, if you will, does not generally or is not supposed to involve castration. It does. That's not part of the procedure, right? You don't. That's not what happens, I guess, if you will. So,
person. But really, eunuchs are the only comparison that we have in the Bible for anything that's outside of the gender norms or the gender binaries. And eunuchs sometimes were made eunuchs by, they were born that way, or they were forced to be that way under slavery, by someone else's doing, or sometimes they chose to do it for themselves. So it's really not about the intent, of how they became a eunuch. And also this Ethiopian eunuch was a foreigner.
Hey, Ring, be a dear and drop the verses she's talking about into the side chat if you have access to a computer anyway. So people can check what she's talking about with the Ethiopian eunuch. If you know the verses, I know you're pretty well versed in the Bible.
So he had a lot of intersectionality about like why he should be included in the church or not. And the law, the Old Testament law, clearly said like that he was not supposed to come in to worship, but he came anyways because he was seeking Christ. And so when Philip went and talked to him, and they discussed the scriptures about the eunuch in Isaiah, and because that was the scroll that the eunuch was carrying with him in Acts chapter 8.
I do think it's sus that the Bible has a whole lot of information about eunuchs, but doesn't have any information about trans people. But I mean, whatever.
He was carrying an Old Testament scripture, and he was, like help me understand this. And so Philip did, and whenever he confessed that he believed, there wasn't any stipulations put on that eunuch to be baptized and to receive the Holy Spirit. Philip just said, do you believe? It wasn't like, well, are you from our land, or do you ascribe to these certain doctrines in our assembly? None of that. There was no restrictions put on the eunuch to come to faith. And so, in comparison to some other things in Scripture where God tells, them to go and do something or not do something again, there were no instructions to that eunuch. It was just come, yes, you could be a part of this. So between those two things, being made in Christ's image and
I will say, I'm going to read what Pat says here too. To me, this is a stupid argument. Which of the two creation myths in Genesis are you going to use as the foundation for their bigotry? They're probably too ignorant to realize that there's two myths. And then, Carrie, I am a reflection of God. I am special and not just a living organism in a greater ecosystem. That is generally just the theist. The theist need, I think, is what I consider that the theist need to have something foundationally unique and special about them. Oh my gosh, pictures of my son on jet skis just popped up. That's amazing. I'm jealous. He's in Florida right now.
there being an example in Scripture that there's no limitations to come to Christ. All you have to do is believe. That's kind of my overall basic places that I have found affirmation in the Scriptures for something that didn't exist in early church times.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about the things that God created and the land and the sea, and that there was like there's a place where the land meets the sea, and there's places that are kind of swampy or
Right.
not exactly land or sea. And so and if we think about that in terms of gender, also that is what we see, right?
If I recall correctly, there have been instances of cultural genders outside the cis binary being translated as eunuch. Oh, so they just called all of us eunuchs. That's an interesting perspective. Okay. Yeah, Florida sucks. Pat was awesome last night. Thank you for putting that on and letting me join, Mr. Mania.
Like we do see this happening even with just the physical, if we're not even talking about what's going on psychologically with people. But if we're just looking at the physical, there are people who don't exactly fit in with male and female. That there is sort of a combination for some people. And so if we take that seriously with
we can't talk about the monsters right now. We're talking about transgender people.
If we understand that with the physical, then why don't we take people seriously?
Lena, I love your little avatar today. Cute as hell, yeah.
With their psychology and what's going on with them. So,
right.
Now, what do you think are some misconceptions that Christians sometimes have about trans people?
So many. I mean, some that I've held even, in my past, admittedly. But I think that
Amy is a homeschool person, I think. Is that what she said? Or, she said at the beginning. You have to go back and look. She's just like a normal person, I think. Yeah.
A lot of people Christians and even just the world at large think that it's about sex, that it's about genitalia, that it's about these specific things. And it's about so much more. That is really a small part of it. And I think that's a huge misconception. The other misconception that I hear just in my circles, people seem to have this sense that all transgender people are predators on children, or
I said homeschool. I meant to say stay-at-home mom. Yeah, she's just like a normal lady, I guess.
That there's some agenda out in the world that they are seeking to, take whatever innocence or thoughts or gender roles even away in society and from.
Just to be clear, this is for Lena. There you go.
Children. So I think that's a huge misconception. And thirdly, I think there's a huge misunderstanding about what it involves to transition, because some people just transition socially. They change their name and their pronouns and maybe their style of dress. Other people will transition legally and socially. And legally is like with name changes or gender markers on legal documents, whatever. And then some people go to another level of surgery and hormone treatment, but it's such an individual choice that not all transgender people have all the surgeries or, do the.
That's a great position to point out there, because there is a certain misconception that you're not trans unless you go all out and get all kinds of surgeries and hormones and things like that. Some people don't need that. They just need the opportunity to dress how they feel, how they identify, to present to the world as they identify. They don't need hormones or anything. They just plug into that.
The most extreme things. It's about satisfying their needs to live authentically. And so there's a scale there for people and what they actually need. So I think people don't really understand that. They think, oh, if you're transgender, then you've had your, genitals mutilated. But,
Yeah, those are great points. And I just want to say thank you to the people who are watching. There's been some really good comments come in. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some of those. I'm starring some comments. So we'll get to those in a minute. I just wanted to ask Amy one more question. What do you want trans people to know about God's heart for them?
You could wait a second. AR just said, when I was Christian, I considered myself a eunuch due to getting a vasectomy and would hate myself for it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
This is like the thing that moves me the most. I just want them to know how much God loves them, just that there is a place for them, not just in this world. I mean, they're fighting for their right to exist in our country in a lot of places, but I want them to know that there's a place in God's family and in the church for them to know and understand and seek and be loved wholly by the God that created them, that understands everything that they're going through and accepts them.
We don't need that. The Christian needs to accept us. We don't need God to accept us, if that makes sense. So if their message is to try to convince trans people to convert to Christianity, they're losing the thread. But if their message is to try to convince Christians to accept trans people, well, then that's on the that's on form today.
So that they're not a mistake, and that there are people out there in the body of Christ that love them.
Yes, exactly. And I love that, and I also want to echo that God loves you exactly as you are. You do not have to conform to a certain idea about male and female in order to be accepted and loved by God just as you are. And I think one of the things that I wanted to address I just put out a video about why it's not a sin to be trans. And I've had some responses from Christians.
Thanks, Ring. I appreciate it. It's just about a conversion. About some Ethiopian eunuchs being baptized. Okay, I understand.
Questions to that. And so one of the responses that I received that I want to respond to is just one about how, God made male and female, and that what I'm doing is I'm teaching people to like be deceived or deceive other people. And, you know, the interesting thing is that for Christians, right, we believe there's so much more to a human being than our physical bodies, right? Like there's so much more to who we are than just our physical bodies. And so we of all people should realize that. And we of all people should realize that if somebody is, you know, psychologically, they believe that they are a male or a female. I mean, that if and that doesn't happen to correspond with their biological expression, we should recognize that part of them as important and not something to just be dismissed, not something
it's not just important, it just is. It is who I am. Not just important. It's not like, oh, you have to realize it's important. I don't want being trans to be an important part of my identity. I just want being a woman to be an important part of my identity, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to be like an ass about it. I'm not trying to be pedantic or whatever, but that's like that's a key distinction to be made. I don't want being a trans woman to be the most important part of my identity as much as, or to be the important part of my, to be that part of my identity as much as just being a woman. So you don't have to, trans is just added on for clarification that I was assigned male at birth and nothing more.
To be, just something that has to be reformed or, not see that as a lie about themselves. But we should recognize that, as maybe even the truer expression of who they are than what their biology shows. Yes. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. In fact, sometimes I think,
Pat, I don't think you're right about both of them, but I know a lot of people. There's some people in my community that are not friends or fans of Bread of Life. So I mean, I'm gonna give some credence to that too.
Because it's all such an individual experience, but sometimes, like not living in that, in the proper gender that they feel in their mind and soul,
I don't know if I understand that. Not living in the proper gender, it's in their mind and soul. So that's what was said. Someone picked that apart for me.
That can be the lie. I can't get my words out. That's deceitful to not live in that truth. So I think that we have to be careful too to judge what someone else is going through, and what's going on in their heart and their mind and who they are.
Yes. Okay, so I want to kind of look at some of these comments I'll put up. And so Brian Stevens says, I think the most important thing for examining your views is getting to know people.
Yeah, I agree. Brian Stevens is based. Brian Stevens has always been based. So I'm with you, Brian Stevens.
Cool. I love, Brianna, what you said here, because I feel like this is something that a lot of Christians are missing. A lot of Christians who resist, trans people and don't want to include them as the church, or, want to say, oh, that's just sinful. What they're doing often is they're just looking at things they see on TV. For example, the thing that's been in the news lately is these drag nuns that dress in drag and do this like sexualized thing. And so like that becomes the image of who trans people are.
So that is a conflation of drag with trans. Most drag people are not trans. Most drag people are cis. A lot of them are homosexuals or bisexuals or pansexuals or something along those lines, but they're all mostly cis, like the majority of them. It's a completely different demographic than trans people. I don't dress up in a costume. I mean, I'm in a costume right now because I was talking about ghost pirates earlier on the show, but I don't live my life as if being a woman is a costume like they do in drag performances. That is something that it's just tainted my taste of drag performances in general. Since childhood, because I was always trans, surprise, and the closest thing that I could find in society to match what I felt about myself was drag queens, and transvestite prostitutes from movies, and they were looked upon with disgust. That made my life really hard and made me really repressive of who I really was.
And I just want to make clear that, like, for me personally, I don't agree with that stuff. Like, I don't want to see hypersexualized stuff, whether it's heterosexual or trans or whatever it is, if it's meant to be like vulgar.
Drag queens are not trans. I don't know why people keep digging their heels in on that. Even people who are being allies for trans people dig their heels on that. We got a conflation between. Can we push back on that as a community, please? We're not the same group. We're not the same people. Please.
And encourage sexual immorality. That is not. I don't agree with that. I don't accept that. But I accept people's freedom to do that. But I don't approve of that from a moral standpoint. But that is not the picture of who trans people are. And so I like what Brian says here about getting to know people, because Christians, if right now you don't have trans people in your life, you really need to, so that you can get a better picture of who they are.
It's hard to get Christians to stop being mean to us, to let us be in their lives, even if were in their lives before. I've lost family over this. I don't think I need to say any more about it, but I have lost family over my transition. So I know all the icky squickies about this whole Christian position towards trans people, and the conflation between us and between us and drag queens, us and the characters that they showed in movies up until the early 2000s. There were movies that were just a joke. We were just a joke.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Do you want to add anything?
I would like to add that more than half of the trans people that I know and that I'm close to are strong Christians. And,
yes.
They're really pursuing Christ and their relationship with God. And I would hold, trans people or any people to the same sexual ethics that I believe the Bible teaches for all of us. So I agree with you, Rebekah. Like, the hypersexualized stuff, that is not representative of, all trans people any more than, I can't even think of a good example, but it's just a stereotype.
It's one I like to use because it's apt. I like to use this is the same notion of the people that are icked by the reality of trans people. You can compare it to how people, certain demographics of people, and I grew up in Missouri, so I promise you these people exist, that are disgusted by interracial relationships and interracial marriages. There are people who absolutely act like that's just revolting, but they will also conflate interracial relationships with pornography, or what they see in pop media and in pornography. So they hyper conflate that. I watched a little clip of Jesse Waters doing an interview with a furry and insisting that furries are people who dress up like cartoon character animals for the most part, like big goofy cartoon character animals. Some of them they do adult events too, but the majority of them are just the same thing as like what you see with Mickey Mouse. They're just characters that these people are playing in a community, and they tried to conflate it and insist that that it was sexual. That furries, that people dressing up as giant cartoon animals was inherently sexual because there is adult-oriented versions of it too. It's because it's a entertainment, a form of performance art that transcends age. From children can enjoy it and adults can enjoy it. It can be presented in an adult manner the same way, and it's drag is something similar to that. They're is drag that's not inherently sexual, or it's even downright silly. Look at the sea witch from the Little Mermaid, the drag queen that she was based on. She wasn't necessarily the character wasn't necessarily sexualized. It was just a character, right? So it's so weird. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to continue this video and stop ranting.
And none of us want to be lumped in as a stereotype with, like not all Baptists are the same. Not all Catholics are the same. We really do need to get to know somebody's heart.
Mm-hmm. Now, so Nitty says, can we make sure that there's a decoupling of the bodily transition, sex, and trans identity of gender? I don't know how to respond to this. What do you have something to say about this, Amy?
Can we make sure that there's a decoupling of the bodily transitioned sex and trans identity of gender? So yeah, a difference between just being transgender and being transsexual. Transsexual being that you've taken medical steps to transition your body to match with the sex that you identify as. Now, when it comes to that, it should definitely be decoupled, because you can be transgender and not be transsexual. It's where you just do the social transitioning. I am transsexual and transgender because I am medically transitioning as well. So,
are they asking if, like, uncoupling the gender and sexual identity? Is that what the question is?
Nitty, we need clarification if you're still there. Andrew says, yay, I'm very excited about this stream. Thanks for being here, Andrew. Carol says, thanks, Rebekah, for these shows that highlight Pride Month. You're welcome, Carol. Thank you for being here. Nitty says, Old Testament law would only be relevant to becoming a Levite priest. This is in conjunction with the talk we were having about eunuchs. So, that's an interesting point. Thank you very much. Nitty says, my former Christian misconceptions. I can pray this out of them. They are choosing this. And number 3, demonic. So do you want to comment on this, Amy?
Let me think about this for a second. I am with them, like with Nitty, that I had some of the same thing, that they were choosing it, that they could pray it away, that I could pray it away.
No, that's not all of who we are. Hey, Nitty.
Hi.
I'm so glad you joined us. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have a lot to add to this conversation.
Sure. I want to clarify what I meant by can we make sure there's a decoupling from the...
Oh, yeah.
My twin brother dressed up as Dr. Frankenfurter for Halloween one year, and he said he got hit on left and right. So, I don't know. Dr. Frankenfurter is a character. The Sea Witch is a character, Ursula. They're just characters. They don't actually outright say the Sea Witch is trans either. It's just, I don't know, implied by the tentacles, I guess.
Yeah.
The bodily transitioned and the societal gender. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that I wish very deeply that both believers and non-believers could just get on board with or start exploring an expansion of our language and way to talk about this issue, right? Because I think a lot of the anger, confusion, and the protesting, all of that.
Just so you guys know, I'm probably just going to let Nitty talk here, because Nitty usually has some pretty dank things to say. So I'm just going to let him go.
That is coming from how this one term, transgender, is a funnel to a lot of people. It includes the people who just want to use different pronouns, but they're completely heterosexual, right? They don't want to get a divorce. They don't want to, wear different clothes or anything like that. And I'm starting to think I'm getting towards that category myself. And transgender can mean people who do want to wear different clothes, but they don't want to fulfill a typical, male, female role as defined in their society. And they might want to wear different clothes, right? But to a lot of people, they're trans now. They're in the funnel. They're going down the slippery slope. They want to do all the things, right? And I'm really glad, Amy, that you and Rebekah made the distinction that for people in this unfortunate umbrella, it's not all about sex. It's not all about the body parts, right? There's a lot more going on here that I wish we just had better language for. That we had better words to describe, this is the kind of person that just doesn't want to fit.
if anybody knows how to get a hold of Nitty, definitely feel free to shoot him a message. Let him know that we're reviewing him right now. I don't want to. Rebekah too, for that matter. If you know how to reach any of these folks, let them know. I will actually. I may even open things up and let them in if they wanted to respond to this, or maybe we would revisit it after I finish up Life in the Hive, because I don't usually do guests on Life in the Hive. I'm not going to start just because of this.
Fit typical roles, right? They're heterosexual, but they don't want to fit so you notice how I have to string together a bunch of sentences to capture one idea, right?
Right.
And then
it's a broad umbrella.
It's too broad.
It really is. It encompasses so much.
Right. And I really wish that we could just and I really like what Brian Stevens said, that we can expand our perspective by actually getting to know the people and where they stand on this and where they're going with it, right? Is this a person that wants to change their body, right? And what's that going to mean for us? And is this a person who just, they don't.
There's Brian Stevens too. It's in the side chat now. Brian was asking the hard questions and making the meaningful comments as well. What link you got here for us, Brian? Let me see. Abortion opponent files lawsuit against Clearwater over buffer zone at abortion clinic. Oh, okay, yeah. It's in the comment section, so go check that out. All right.
Fit our puzzle pieces in society for what we want them to. And that's okay too, right? So that's what I wanted to clarify about.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That makes sense.
And so, maybe I'll use my goofy brain and I'm going to come up with some words.
Well, good. Put them out there.
Yeah, and YouTube Punk says, is Nitty a gender abolitionist? I think historically, because of the historic messiness of what we're now calling.
I would consider myself a gender spectralist, because I think that we can put up a gradient, right, and probably drop a pin in places where people fall.
Calling, I wish like the ideas of he, she, not necessarily he, she, but male, female as what you do in society would go away, right? But my daughter's inside. But I'm not against people affirming their biological state either, right? Or what the parts they have. But that's none of my business either. So.
Nitty, do you want to share? Do you have anything like words of wisdom? Because do you want to share any more about your experience as a Christian?
Yeah.
With this topic.
Yeah, because my biological sperm donor, we'll say, is now a woman. For in societal conception and physical, right? They've gone the whole 9 yards with it. Mm-hmm. And so I guess
I didn't know that Nitty had a parent that transitioned. Do you call your Nitty? Do you call your sperm donor? Do you call them dad or mom now? I would prefer my kids to call me mom, but it's kind of weird for them, I think. So I don't know. It's a personal preference thing, but my oldest son just calls me his parental. He's so funny. I
think that if I would have remained in my faith and when this person dies, I think I would have ended up with a lot more regret, because my faith, in my interpretation of my faith, would be to otherize this person, keep them out of my life, keep them out of my children's life, keep them away from my family. And I have a warranted excuse because they're living apart from God's design or whatever, right? And it made me resent them. And again, I'm not saying this is your guys' Christianity, it's just mine, right? And I think at the end of the line for that person, they would just be gone. And I wouldn't have the chances to say, I'm sorry you weren't allowed to come to my wedding. I'm sorry that I've been hiding your grandchildren from you, and so don't be that person. Don't be hold
that
up
person.
The valuable connection that you can have with your family members because of this muddy topic, this difficult thing to work through. with your relative that's going through it, right? And
Right.
they're enduring persecution, stigmatization, maybe a lot of uncertainty with themselves. And I think all the things that you're worried about for them, their mental health outcome, their depression, their potential for substance, whatever, like
Yeah.
a lot of that would go away if you would be there.
Mhm.
Sorry, I might cry.
No,
Yeah.
it's important. Sorry, Rebecca.
So.
Thank you, Nitty.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I want to let you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you, Nitty. I mean, I think that's another misconception people have, is that the mental health issues that trans people face, and trans, I mean, that broad umbrella that you were just describing, but the mental health issues are so complex. And I think people try to narrow it down just to the gender dysphoria or the gender roles that, this person's being forced into, that, they don't feel like they fit in or whatever. But it really has so much to do with their disconnection, their economic.
Yes, do not let your religious bigotry taint the way that you treat your fellow man. That's simple and straight to the point.
Instability because of discrimination and religious discrimination. I mean, there's so many layers to it, and we could alleviate so much of that by just loving them. And that's another thing that going back to one of your first questions that you had, Rebecca, about what brought me to be affirming. I mean, Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit were consistent and clear all the way through the Bible. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself, and and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And I just feel like if we can love these people well, we take care of half the problem.
Right.
Not to say that would alleviate.
Hey, where did that fan come from? When was that added? No way. Is that just part of the standard package? Yeah. Sweet. Look at that. It looks really good with the butterfly moth. It's a moth. It's a colorful pride moth. It's pride month without the
well, right. I mean, they're taking care of a lot of problems in the world. But I agree with you, Nitty. Just to love our family members, love our neighbors. These people are going through like things that we can't even fathom, and they need us.
Nitty, because so I want to ask you, would our arguments that we're making here make a difference to you in that place that you were as a Christian? Because to me, this trans thing is easy. It's there's nothing. There's
I don't know about this trans thing, but let's hear what she has to say.
Who can bring an argument from the Bible to make to excuse themselves for rejecting trans people? I don't see it. So
I think part of the problem for me would be that I would need someone like with what I just said about, let's get this umbrella, let's turn this umbrella into a bunch of raincoats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my Christian self, whatever that was, especially early on, would just be like, oh no, hell no, they're in the umbrella that God doesn't like, right? Because they want to wear the clothes that He says no to. They want to do with the parts that, or they're going to want to do with their parts the things that God says, that.
Alina, I'm going to try to be more charitable than that, and assume that she was saying that bigotry is half, and the other half is ignorance. I'm gonna try to assume that that's what the implications were until she says otherwise. I try to see the best in people. I'm a pragmatist.
Because there's sin in the world, this is like a taint of sin that maybe the Spirit could heal them of or make them overcome or something like that. So no, your arguments wouldn't have convinced me without someone being like, hang on.
So it's really your personal experience with knowing somebody that.
No, because my biological father, just to make it simple, has been trans for most of my adult life, almost my entire adult life. So it wasn't knowing anybody, because my beliefs were more important at the time than anybody, really. Because if Jesus commanded me to...
This is stuff I didn't know about Nitty, so...
legislate them into a prison, I guess like that's what I would have done, because I would have believed that's God's will, you know. So I was that kind of Christian. I was a fundy that didn't like to be called a fundy.
Me too. I get that.
But Nitty, like, so, but like, what were the like ideas in your mind? Like, where did they come from? Was this a church teaching, or like, where did the idea come from to that, you know, trans people were unacceptable?
I think part of it was the community that I was involved in and their treatment of trans people who came into the church. It was treated as if like without distinctions, without nuance, right? So if they just weren't, you know, societally gender conforming, or they wanted to wear different clothes, or maybe they do want to transition, right? All of that was bucketed to something is wrong with this person. So we're going to send them to Christian counseling. And if they don't do what we want through Christian counseling, they're gone. They're out of this church. Community, no more. Where you're living, you're not living with us. Good luck out there, right? And they just disfellowship wholesale, right? So I guess that's where a lot of it's coming from. And then I would guess that we would all try to step back and say, well, you know, this is all because the Bible says so. And it would be our reading, or that community's reading of the text, with that like kind of bucketed mindset that would continue that bigotry. And, you know, I'll just call it abuse. So yeah, and I was only like 22, 23 when someone would come to our our big teaching, right? And they were like 18, 19 years old, and they were some form of trans. I'm not completely sure, but I can guarantee you that when they were gone, it was because after a while they didn't respond to Christian counseling, or they weren't doing the things that my church demanded.
Ooh, is this person going to be spicy because they got the original 13 colonies on their avatar
of them, and they were just not welcome, you know, anymore. And if people keep showing up and they're not welcome, like they will use some kind of like restraining order or something to like make sure you don't come back. So
wow.
Yes, so fun.
Ace Philosophy is here. Welcome. Glad you're here.
How
you doing?
Good question, Rebecca. And I hope that makes a lot more sense of some things with me. And thank you, Amy, for your growth as a person. And I'll catch you guys in the chat, because people like, hey, what are you doing?
No, I appreciate it too. It's a long journey, but I think more of us are coming to this place every day.
Goodbye for now.
Okay.
Nice to talk to you.
Thanks for coming on. Ace Philosophy, what would you like to say on this topic?
Well, I would like to say that I did get here quite recently. I wasn't able to see a lot of the conversation before this. I probably started listening about 5 minutes ago. So I don't really have a lot of the context. I just kind of saw the title of the video and think it's an intriguing topic.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, my opinion is going to differ from the people who have been here before. I consider myself much more socially conservative. And I used to be, you know, we're throwing labels. I'm throwing labels around here, but I used to be more liberal and supportive of the quote LGBTQ movement. But and to answer the question, I do not think that being transgender is a sin. So I just want to say that straight up. I don't think it. But I'm seeing that the legitimate concerns of people who are transgender being lumped in with people who I think are actually doing things that are wrong in society. Yes. And it just seems to me like some of these individuals, well, let me put it this way. I think that this movement is becoming a little totalitarian in the same way that historically Christians have silenced and suppressed people, you know, who didn't agree.
Totalitarian, yes. Trans saying, hey, we want to be recognized as existing is totalitarian now. Who knew? Who knew it was totalitarian? Yes, I'm saying not only do you have to accept me as a trans person, you have to transition yourself. That is the whole of the law. We will only have femboys and trans women, and there will and cis men will be forced to be slave labor, and whatever.
I think we're seeing a swing where now the shoe is on the other foot, and the transgender, homosexual, LGBT crowd is now the one smashing people who won't accept their ideology and beliefs, even if they disagree.
It's not an ideology. It's not a belief. We're just people. We're a portion of the population. We're not an idea. We're not an idea of a portion of the population. We are the population. We are people who exist in the society that you live in.
Agreements are real. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm seeing instances where if someone, like, you see some of, like, just give specific examples, you see some of these instances where transgender athletes are competing, are demanding they be allowed to compete in women's sports. And obviously,
Sports. How about we just don't do sports anymore? That's my solution for that. Sports are stupid, and we shouldn't do them anymore.
not everyone's going to agree that this is a good idea. And I can I can understand the perspective of the transgender people, that they really feel this way, that they are the other biological sex. But I guess I'm just not seeing an acceptance of this, the other side, which is like, well, you know, especially when it comes to males transitioning to female, they still retain their you know, masculine.
Well, so what you're making here is an argument for puberty blockers, right? So this doesn't happen if they're allowed to take puberty blockers until they're old enough to make the medical transition. Now, if you force someone to go through male puberty first, which is what is currently being legislated, they're saying, hey, we want to force these people to go through male puberty, and they're an athlete that performs in a certain event, then you are forcing them to have that any physiological advantage by forcing them to go through a male puberty.
And male,
strength, their muscle and strength.
Yes, and I guess it's just like they're bulldozing.
I wish I retained some of my muscle and strength. I can't open jars anymore. I have to make Ian help me. It's gone. It's also probably part of getting old too, but having arthritis. Like if I play guitar for more than 45 minutes, my hands are broken for a week.
Over anyone who's like, wait a minute, let's slow down here and ask if this is a good thing for society. Things like that. And it's like there's just no acceptance of, well, you know, it doesn't really work that way. And they're, you know, destroying people who
honestly just have performance categories. I don't know what else to tell you. Performance categories makes more sense too. This is like, in I think it was in the 50s when they were trying to integrate athletics for races and stuff, that there was this idea that, if we let this ethnic group play the sport, then we can look and see that they have a physical advantage or whatever, right? So there was this notion that they were going to outcompete all the white guys, or they were going to screw up the game somehow by being included. The same arguments were made, and they brought stats. They said, hey, look at these statistics that say, you know, these people perform these marginally better than this group of people, or vice versa. There were things where they said, the white people will be too superior, and they won't, and the ethnic groups won't be able to compete. Generally it was black people that they focused on. That they won't be able to compete if we integrate them. They won't be able to compete with us and be part of the environment. It was silly, and they brought stats and data the same way that these trans sports arguments folks do, and yeah.
who disagree with them. I'll leave it there if you want to comment on anything I've said already, but
yeah, well, I mean, and I think the thing that we're kind of focused on is, and the way I feel about it is that, like, there are...
See, before we settle the thing about sports, let's settle the thing about society. Because right now that's where the issue is. It's not in sports. It's not whether or not we can perform at an elite level in sports. It's whether someone like me can feel safe walking down the street and not get a brick thrown at my head.
Cultural issues going on related to transgender people that have nothing to do with how Christians should interact with transgender people, and so, like, my focus is not on sorting out the things that are going on in our culture that have nothing to do with faith, but what I'm advocating for is that it is not a sin to be trans. God loves and embraces trans people. And in fact, I think if Jesus were here today,
that is true. There are levels of sporting events where that they were integrated, that they were the genders were integrated, and then a woman won, and then the very next it was Olympics, and the very next Olympics they had segregated the sexes.
Trans people would be among the first that he would appear to and hang out with, because they have been so stigmatized and often rejected by people of faith. And so it's about
Beamsy. That's because sports aren't fair inherently. People are going to perform better than others. But it's in the same way that you can draw a graph to say that that people of this that have their ancestry with this haplo group could perform these feats better than people that have ancestry among this haplo group is scientific. I mean, it's not; those aren't the actual races or anything like that. Absolutely not. But there is correlation that they tried to use in their arguments about integrating sports. They were bad arguments. I think the arguments about sex and gender are bad too. There's like you said, there's no way to make it fair. It's just not an option. Ooh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you for gifting subs. Absolutely. And now we got new members. We got Ring, and we got Godseed, and we got Carol and Rick and Ox. Awesome. Welcome to the Hive.
We are advocating for the church to stop paying attention to those cultural issues and focus on the people themselves and like our disposition toward them, and trying to like bring Christian awareness that these are people who need to be embraced by the church. And
I got to clarify to everybody here, I'm mostly anti-contact sports and things like that. I don't think that we should be letting children play football, for instance. I think that's the injuries that can come from playing football are not something that we should be subjecting children to. But that's an opinion that may be a hard sell for a lot of people, so I don't usually talk about it. But I am anti-children engaging in any kind of contact sports before the age of 18.
And that, there's no biblical reason to call this a sin, or, so I loved what you said, A's philosophy, that being trans is not a sin. And I would like to know what your, more about, what your ideas are about how to reach Christians who do think it's a sin.
Well, when we're talking about transgender individuals, we have to realize this isn't something like they're just really deviant individuals and they're choosing to.
Is tackle basketball a thing? I didn't think tackle basketball was like a real thing.
Do this bad thing. I think it is something that they really in their minds feel is who they are, and it's not like a show to like corrupt society or anything,
right,
or something like that.
Right.
I really do think that there are this is I'm trying not to be too controversial here, but like from a medical standpoint, there is a medical, and I hate to use quote offensive terms, but this is something that the medical community has realized is real. It's not like just people doing wrong things. Let me put it that way.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a mental illness, though. Let's be clear. There are mental illnesses that stem from being trans in a society, in the current society, though. Gender dysphoria is a big one. Agoraphobia can stem from that too.
So I think that should be realized as well. I think that I've heard, and also when you're talking about homosexuality, I hear a lot of Christians saying, "Oh, it's just like I've heard people say, oh, it's people who looked at too much obscene material when they were young, and it just now they're just so corrupt that they." No, I don't think that's true at all. I think that these individuals are just feeling this way, and it's not a result of them like being really bad people. It's just who they really are. I do believe that.
I agree. I've heard other people say like trans people are trans because they've experienced some sort of sexual trauma or something too. And that might be the case for some, but that's not the overt.
No, that's so crude. It's so crude, but no, we're not the result of sexual trauma. I am not the result of sexual trauma. What is meant to as fair as if you go to full gender affirming, there will be a small group that will abuse it. But if you set it to so, I guess that's supposed to be to prevent that is against gender affirming care. I'm sorry, I'm not following that. Maybe it's the wording, I don't know. But we can talk about it sometime, Beamsy.
Reaching like consensus of trans experiences.
But here's the thing. There are people out there who are trans who are giving the other trans people a bad name.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you see that kind of makes the headlines on your typical, Christian/conservative, website or whatever. Maybe it's not the majority, but it is something that's like, okay, this is a negative element to this kind of movement. Like some of the stuff, like some of the stuff you see with like these drag queen shows, just for example. I don't know if you've heard about these things, but there are men dressing as women, which isn't in itself wrong, but then they're putting on these performances, and some of these people are doing it for, they're saying, well, like, bring the kids for like library reading hour. It's like, okay, that seems over the top. And
why is people dressed in costumes so offensive to these people? Why is it so offensive for someone to be on the stage in a costume if it doesn't fit the people have been, and to be clear, people have been doing this for hundreds of years, at least since Shakespeare's time. Men have been performing as women on stage consistently. It's only in the last 2 or 3 years that it suddenly becomes such a huge problem. All of a sudden they're like, hey, by the way, did you know that there's in stage art there is men who dress up as women, and it's called drag, and oh my gosh, let's make a big fuss about it. All of a sudden, it's for centuries we've had this staple of our society where cis men play the roles of women on stage, whether as a comedic effect. An erotic effect is fine. That's not when the children are there. Obviously, you aren't doing erotic performances. And that's where they get caught up and don't understand. This is the same thing. Now they're going after furries. So it doesn't matter what kind of costume that you wear. It's performing for children in any kind of costume.
And I do think that needs to stop. And I wish the LGBT community would be like, yeah, that's not us. Those people have a problem. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, Rebekah.
I think that people who bring their kids to an adult drag show have a problem. I don't agree with people bringing their children to an adult drag show. That's bad. And I also don't agree with people engaging in kink culture in public. I don't like seeing pride parades where people are dressed in kink outfits and things like that. It does nothing good for our community for them to do that publicly. I don't think cis straight people should do kink culture in public, and I don't think that that our pride events should involve kink culture. At least not without certain disclaimers and not in the public square. That's my opinion on it. That's just where I stand. I don't like seeing kink in public, no matter what the situation is. But when it comes to general pride stuff, no. And when it comes to general drag, no. That's fine. Do it. Bring your children if it's child friendly. And people are going to freak out when they see a drag queen wearing the same thing that you can see a gymnast wear when you go to a athletic event, right? When you go to athletic events, there's nothing that you bring kids to those all the time, and people wear skimpy stuff. Wrestling has had people in skimpy little outfits for decades, and it's the most manly thing ever. They got sweaty guys wearing Speedos, grappling all over each other, and we're fine with that. But a trans person wearing something that's exposed midriff is all of a sudden a sin. What the hell?
had said something a little while ago about not being on board, and I agree with her. So I'm repeating, if it's okay with you, Rebecca,
Yeah.
that we're not advocating for like hypersexualized anything, heterosexual, homosexual, transgender, like none of that. You know, that we
Good,
still
Amy.
need to have ethics and morals in our society. You know, and children shouldn't be exposed to that hypersexual stuff from any, you know, perspective.
Thank you. That's exactly what I just spent all the time ranting about.
You know, it's not the drag queen really that I have a problem with. It's the the hypersexualized drag show.
Exactly. And that's what Brian Stevens put up here, is that, you know, what's wrong with the drag queen show? And it's not about the drag queen. It's about, you know, I don't want my kids seeing anything like that, like anything that's like it's supposed to be.
There's different types of drag shows, though. They just pretend that they're all sexual. They're not. Most of them are. The majority of drag shows that I've witnessed or seen or been privy to have been musical, have been comedic and musical. So they have people that do comedy sketches, and they'll have people that like are stand up, and then they'll have people that do that sing or dance. Or sing and dance.
Be sexually stimulating.
Or lip sync and dance.
You know, that kind of thing. So I think that's
like
the
if
main
they're
issue.
reading regular children's books, like great.
Right.
Like I'm okay with that.
Right, exactly. Like I have no problem with, you know, a drag queen reading a kid's book. It's fine.
Yeah.
Great.
But it's like,
you know, that's
what about a drag queen reading a kid's book to children? Do you have a problem with that?
No.
You don't?
I have no.
Why
I
would you have a problem with
don't have a problem with that. But I don't want them reading.
So why does a man dressed as a
Provocative.
woman? Why is a man dressed as a woman good for children? How does that build their ethics and morality?
It builds acceptance and lets them know that all sorts of people are out there, and they can be nice even if they're different. They can be friendly and read to you even if they're different.
Is that
well? I mean,
especially as a
like
Christian
philosophy, are you kind of reserved? I mean, I'm just, you know, if being trans is not a sin, then why would, you know, somebody who is trans, you know, and
what is
a man,
what is a drag
a
queen?
trans woman, reading a book to kids? Why would that? Like, what would be wrong?
So
about
there's
that?
more conflation here. A drag queen is not a trans woman. Yeah, I'm talking about people wearing like bondage gear and stuff like that. I've seen pictures of people at Pride wearing that kind of stuff, and I'm like, no, at least not before 9:00, maybe something like that, you know, because they'll have Pride events like campgrounds and stuff too.
Because, well, I mean, again, I'm going to try not to be too controversial, but there are men and there are women. You can't be the other thing. Once you're born as one, you're that. And
no one is born as a man or a woman. What a weird thing to say. Men and women are adults, not even born. You're born as you were born as male or female. You don't develop a gender identity usually until you develop an identity. And for my example, I have a twin brother, and he's masculine as hell. I was always effeminate and in this way. I was just kind of queer, and I worked really hard to mask it. But I always when I developed my identity, I identified as being like my mommy, and it was weird because I had my brother, and I was like, he's like my daddy, and I'm like my mommy, and that's how we work. And it wasn't until gender roles started being put upon me that I started realizing that, oh, I'm supposed to be filling this role, and just started doing that. And it still leaned back in several times throughout my life.
Now, I know that there are genetic conditions where there are actually people born with both, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people born as one biological sex, trying to promote the idea in society that what you're born as is just, you know, it's something that doctors assign to you, but they don't really know until you make a decision. It's like, no, there's biology here.
Because you don't have an identity when you're a baby. You just have a sex. Your sex is just what it determines certain things about how your body releases hormones in your development. And there's different times when your body is so early on in the embryonic state. You're given a hormone wash of sex hormones that'll make you develop towards male or female. Then there's a secondary wash, and this is the funny thing about identical twins like myself. There's a secondary wash that comes later in development, and with identical twins, they're from a split egg, like one egg split in two after it was fertilized and created two babies. There's a second wash that triggers hormones in your brain. So your brain and your body, generally, they generally coincide, but they can you can get that hormone washed a little bit this way, a little bit that way. Regardless, yeah.
This is the truth. The truth is that there's men. If you're born a man, you're always going to be a man.
Nobody has ever been born a man. That's weird. Was he talking like Benjamin Button, where you're born an old man? You're born a male or female, not a man. A man is a gender identity. Identity is developed much later.
Believe something different, but biologically, that's what. And the same with women. And I think what these people are trying to do is they're trying this, and this is.
And trans people again are different than than people doing drag. So.
How God created it. This is how God created the system. So what they're essentially doing is teaching people to disagree with God's system, in my opinion.
I'd like to challenge that.
This is hi Jamie, welcome.
Hey,
I'll let you
sorry,
jump in then, Jamie. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I just think it's more complicated than that. Like, it's kind of like, well, God created immune systems, so when someone gets sick and dies, it's like God wanted it that way or something. There's just things are obviously broken anyway, whether you want to say someone's broken or not. The point is, even broken, I think Danny's argument.
I think that's a message about the fall is we're in a broken world.
Read about this before too. Like, if you can, I don't know, it could be a biological issue and a spiritual issue, and I mean that in the sense of just like being. Like having the wrong spirit, like why is that not possible under Christianity? It seems if other things can happen where you have the quote unquote, switched, something's wrong and where it's not how it was originally designed, let's say, I don't see why you can't posit
I
that
like
as
this
possible.
argument, Jamie Russell. So the argument that he's presenting is that because we live in because in their mythology we live in a fallen world where now plants have thorns and snakes have venom and lions eat meat and don't eat melons anymore. All that fun stuff. The saber-toothed cat using its tooth to chop up heads of lettuce. And now we eat meat and animals eat meat and they have to kill and defend themselves. And now he's conflating to say that, hey, that's also what trans people are. That we're a mistake because of the fall. I don't want to agree with that.
Well, I mean, I don't think God wants us to not use medical, intervention or whatever. It seems like there could be all sorts of issues that we can't be sure about. Like, why not? Why couldn't somebody have the wrong soul and the wrong body because of the whatever reason? I don't know. Just God wanted it this way, so if you get cancer, you can't get treatment. I mean, that's kind of like what I'm hearing you saying.
Not really. I mean,
in principle,
like I said, I want to distinguish between the people who I think are quote genuine, and again, I'm really trying to avoid saying anything offensive, but it is difficult. But it does seem to me like just that there's an element of it that it's like it kind of confirms the beliefs of these really super these Christians who kind of promote this.
I am not a mistake, at least not as far as I know. I guess I'm surprised because my parents weren't expecting twins, so I was like, they wanted a son and they got a son and a daughter. So they already had a daughter. I have an older sister.
Really strong anti-LGBTQ rhetoric when they see these things, and it's like, well, okay, yeah, it kind of makes it seem like they have a point. Is my thing. Like when you have these instances, and maybe it's just a fraction.
But drag queen, there's no D for drag queen in the LGBTQ. Sorry, they're part of actually this generally part. Well, they could be part of the LGBT. They could be part of any of them, but they're not a special category among them.
Of everything, but nevertheless, it's like, okay, it just kind of it's just strange to me that they think that this is a good way to go, and it just kind of gives credence to these other really super conservative Christians who are saying like the LGBTQ thing is like sin and bad for society. That's just kind of how
I tried to absorb my twin, but I couldn't get him. He kicked me away. I tried to absorb him to be twice as powerful.
I see it. I kind of agree.
I basically agree with that. I would say I know. Like when I was a kid, I grew up in a non-conservative, kind of a liberal area in Seattle, And like my parents had Christian backgrounds, conservative Adventist backgrounds, and they owned a business. And like my dad had a lot of employees, and like they didn't affirm homosexual, unions and things like that. This is way before the marriage thing, but he had employees, and you just kind of treat people with respect. And seems like that's how we should operate, just the same. And you don't have to necessarily affirm it, but you don't you just treat people as normal people. If they dress like, if there's someone who you can tell is trans, you just treat them appropriately, just without making a big deal about it. So that's all. Yeah, go ahead.
So treating people with respect. So I agree with that. The homosexuals, the transgenders, they should be treated with respect. But people are gonna.
I hate being called the transgendered. I'm just a trans people's fine.
Disagree on what that looks like, because there are people who will say, well, treating with respect means telling them the truth. So we're talking. Let's go to the example of like preferred pronouns. Okay, well, there are people who say the respectful thing is to refer to them according to their birth, biological sex pronoun. But obviously, the transgender people are going to get offended by that. So, like, what is respect? There's an argument that respect can actually mean disagreeing with them and telling them they're wrong, because that's what the truth is, what they need to hear.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I don't take that very seriously. I think tell them the truth.
The issue with that, I think, is that it assumes that the truth about them is what the biology shows. And so, like, if we take transgender people's experience seriously, their experience is that, and I can't speak for all, but from my understanding, for many, it's the experience that what they feel is their gender is not what is biologically expressed. So, I would make the argument that, as Jamie said, not everything goes according to like God's intention these days, right? I mean, I just saw a picture of a kid whose legs were
well, that's okay. We're past the nitty part right now, anyway.
Born on backwards, like his legs were like turned around. Okay, so what happened? He got a surgery to turn his legs on properly. And what would we say? Was it more God's intention for his legs to be backward? Or would we say the surgery helped him to be restored to God's intention, right? Like God's intention, from what we see in the world, is for people's legs to be in this direction that helps them walk and doesn't cause a problem for them. So, what is true about the transgender people is what if God's intention for them is how they feel about their gender, not the biology. The psychology is more important than the biology. And that is actually true God's intention. So then by helping them to transition, and affirming that, we're actually affirming God's intention for them, right? And we're helping their body conform to what God's intention for their gender was.
Doesn't seem out of the question.
Well,
I would have to admit, but I think there's just so much risk there in this issue, though. But
what risk is there? Let's hear what you said.
To say that that's not possible is just being obtuse. I agree.
I will say sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's a good argument. And I think there are cases in which it can apply, but for instance, there are cases of transgender people who later on stop being transgender after
detransitioners.
They're reconstructed.
Yeah, people have regrets about getting surgery on their genitalia. It's like 0.05% or something like that. That detransition. 0.05% is the percent of the population that's trans, but something like 1.2% or something of detransitioners regret detransitioning. Now, you compare that to any other surgery, and that's a really, really excellent. That's stellar regret rate. Again, I work in the medical field, so I kind of know how these things go with medical coding and surveying for efficacy. So, like knee replacement surgeries, 20% of people regret knee replacement surgery.
Surgery, and if you listen to the accounts of these people, it's a tremendous source of pain for them and regret. So, we have like Jamie. I like the way.
And but there's people who were forced to go through the puberty that's against what they are, like myself, and there's more regret and and psychological damage that's done there.
Jamie said it. We have to be very careful about how we, and maybe we have to look at specific and individual cases. But, and by the way, I hate to run after having the last word, but someone's calling for me, so I have to. But I want to.
Yeah.
If you want to respond to what I said, I'll listen for a minute, and then I'll just head out, just so you can respond to what I said.
I'm gonna listen to this response, and then we're probably gonna wrap this up here for now.
Okay, can I jump in really quick, Rebecca?
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate your comments, and I agree we should be very careful. The thing I'd just like to say is that the people that detransition, there's actually a term for it, detransitioning, is the transgender community is already like 1 or 2% of the population. And the people that detransition is such
even less. It's 0.05%.
Sliver of even that. It is so rare for them to actually go full in. And we're hearing a lot of that in the media right now, but that is not representative really of the statistics of it. So we also need to be, like people have back surgery all the time, and the statistics of them having back surgery and regretting it is higher than if they transition and regret it.
She's basically making the same case that I made, except for using back surgeries instead of knee surgeries.
I said that kind of quickly, so my statistic language didn't come across very smoothly. But you know what I'm saying? Like people that have back surgery and then have problems after their back surgery, more people have that problem than they do if they transition and then regret it. Statistically speaking.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to have to leave on that, but I appreciate you inviting me to have a conversation for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks
nice
for
to talk
coming
to you.
on, Ace Philosophy. Great to see you.
All right, we're gonna just end it right here where Ace Philosophy left. Just having a little bit of creation watch, exploring the Bread of Life channel. I've not done the response to Rebekah before. That was an interesting one. I know she's not exactly a favorite among my community. So I do appreciate y'all sticking around just to just at least watch and listen and see what the people over there on the other side are saying. Because not everybody on the other side is just full on toxic, wanting us all dead. There's like a spectrum of people who are trying to be allies too. So for what it's worth, that's the situation I think that we're in there. Take it or leave it. That was Creation Watch for today. And thank you very much for sticking with us. Please remember to be kind and take care, and we'll see you next time.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going, because they were holding on to something. That there is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for.